So let's talk. We played craft about the draft. So you're hearing. What are you hearing about the Patriots and who they are spending most of their time looking in on?
I think that this is probably going to wind up being chalk. Would be my guess now. 6 days out. And again, like people ask me like how, like, well, who would tell you what they're doing? And it's more like this time of year, me talking to all 32 and putting the pieces together, and it's their job to know what the other teams are doing. And I can't find very many people that don't think they're taking Will Campbell with the fourth overall pick. They have the other thing that I've heard, they have spent an inordinate amount of time with him. They had a 30 visit with him that was very early in the process. He emphatically has checked boxes with Mike Vrabel specifically. To the point where when I was talking with somebody from another team who said to me, and I use this, I think I said to you guys last week, like that, like I think Mike Vrabel is going to ask Will Campbell to move in with him after he drafts him. So like I think a lot of arrows are pointing that way right now. Now, obviously, this isn't a perfect prospect, and I think we know that. Like, he's got narrow shoulders, he's got short arms, he struggled with some of the longer-armed guys in the SEC when he did have trouble, and he was fairly dominant.
He did?
Yeah, I mean, like, he was fairly dominant, but, like, when you did what and again, I'm not breaking down SEC line play, so that's not...
No, but you talk to people who do.
I'm talking to everybody who does. And what's come up is, like, with the guys that like when you break down the cut ups where he has struggled, it was generally with the longer armed guys in the SEC where they would get into his chest, they would be able to control him, and they would be able to hand fight against him. And like that's an issue. Like that's something like when you look at that, it's like, okay, like, you know, is he a tackle? Is he a guard? And again, I brought up the name Brandon Sheriff before, which I think is a good one to look at here. This 10 years ago, the then Redskins took him 5th overall, and he was a left tackle at Iowa. A lot of people projected him to guard. He went into camp. They tried to let him play tackle. He got beat out by Morgan Moses. And one of the things that came up in camp was he could not block Ryan Kerrigan. And so Ryan Kerrigan was a really good player at the time. They decided to move him inside to guard. No one would call that a miss. He made 5 Pro Bowls, became the highest paid guard in the history of football at one point. So he's a really good player, but he was a guard. And I think you have to, if you're taking Will Campbell 4th overall, you have to be comfortable with that as a possible conclusion. The other thing you could do, and I think that this is a possibility, is you play him at tackle as a rookie, and then maybe you go get your left tackle next year and eventually move him inside to guard. So you have that taken care of now, and maybe it's not perfect, but it's a lot better than it was, with the idea that eventually you're going to have somebody else playing left tackle.
Okay, so say they don't sign Morgan Moses in the offseason.
Yeah.
If you were the Patriots, just based on who you talked to, didn't you take Memboo out of Missouri because he's a surefire right tackle?
I think so. Memboo is still really raw. So that, I think, is the question with Memboo. From the more I've sort of dug into this, the more it's like Memboo is doesn't have the same maturity level that Campbell does as a player or as a person. So is he going to be the kind of pro you want him to be? Like, now, what do you have to grow into that a little bit?
Can you elaborate?
Nothing bad, but just like, is he going to be the hardest working person in the building? Which I think Campbell, like, he's going to come in and he's going to be that.
Right.
And so, like, with Campbell, you're getting a guy who's going to be able to play right away. With Memboo, there's more like, is it going to take a year or two for him to become what you ultimately think he's going to be? The really interesting thing to me, and like this is just, again, talking to people over the last couple of weeks, is that the two guys that are the most natural left tackles in the class are probably Kelvin Banks from Texas, who had some really bad tape against Georgia, but like 100% like fits like he's a left tackle, you know. And then Josh Simmons from Ohio State, who had a really bad injury, like worse than an ACL. It's a patella tendon. It's a bad injury for a big man.
Cole Strange injury, right?
Yeah, so and he had his medical recheck, which I heard was a little sketchy last weekend in Indianapolis. Plus, there's a character issue with him where he's another one of these guys. Like, does he have? he's from a rough background, so there's like a life skills question with him. Like you're going to have to kind of hold his hand a little bit.
Ohio State didn't get that out of him?
Well, they tried. No, they developed him into maybe the best tackle in the draft on tape. Yeah.
Says something about the program.
They made him a tackle, but did they make him a man?
Yeah.
And that's why you send your kid to
I don't
Tommy's
know.
up.
I don't know how much.
Why you send him to Michigan?
I don't know how much more mature I became in my 4 years there. So,
But you know what, Bert? I think that you liked it a little bit. Because
I liked it a lot. Yeah.
Based on, I've never met anyone, and this is an absolute no hyperbole. I've never met anyone, certainly at your age, that enjoys college more than you do.
It was a great 4 years. Anyway,
but it was 4 years, and it's really what your life is centered around.
No, well, the football games in the fall, I'm a little over the top.
But you are very involved in that program. You love it.
Anyway, so I would say
he loves to move on from that.
Anyway, I would say it's a tricky thing because there's no Joe Alt this year. Like
right.
Joe Alt looks like he came off like an assembly line to play left tackle in the NFL. And so there's no one like that. And I'd even argue like Olu Fashanu from Penn State last year was more like that than what you have here. J.C. Latham from Alabama last year was more like that than probably anybody you have this year. But I think the closest thing you have to it is a guy who doesn't have the best tape in Kelvin Banks, and B, a guy who's hurt and has maturity concerns in Josh Simmons.
That's interesting.
So I think that part of it is kind of what makes it tricky, and I think that's probably why you just, in this case, I think you take Will Campbell, and I wouldn't argue with the pick because it is an investment back in your young quarterback, and with your young quarterback going to year 2, can you afford for there to be development time for that left tackle, or can you afford, if it's Simmons, can you afford hey, he might not be ready.
Sure.
So I there's that I think.
All right, let's bring. I am interested in this. I hear people vehemently defending Shadour Sanders. In fact, on the way in today, I heard Rich Eisen, which I know why he's doing is because he's good friends with Dion, and he admitted it. But he's like, yeah, if you're looking for someone with a good arm that's a prototypical size and that runs a 4.6, this isn't your guy. But all these things about his character and attitude, and I swear to God, I'm hearing nothing about his character and attitude that's negative. Everything is that
that's there too.
Okay, but I'm not hearing it.
Different teams have had different experiences with him.
Teams.
Yeah.
But in terms of a general attitude about why Shadour Sanders wouldn't be taken in the media, it's based on his physical ability,
which people can't wrap their head around because this is the son of Dion, but what they don't realize is that the margins at that level of sports, these guys are all we're not talking about me and you. These are needles and haystacks. The margins are thin when you're talking about that level of athletes. So when we say Shadour Sanders isn't an elite athlete, in the context of a normal human being, he is.
Oh, yeah.
But,
I mean, it's the same thing with Jason Tatum. We had this argument.
Right.
Jason Tatum, for a basketball player,
right,
isn't jumping out of the gym.
It's like Michael Jordan's kids were great athletes, but they weren't Michael Jordan.
Well, Bronny James is a great athlete, but he's not LeBron James.
Right. So, I think I have not been able to find, and I've probably talked to over 100 coaches, scouts, all of that over the last 2 or 3 weeks about the draft specifically. I can't find anybody who thinks he's a first-round talent. And it feels a little bit like the one thing that gives me pause is, and I brought this up to you guys last week, it does feel like Bo Nix. Where Bo Nix, it was the same thing last year, but everybody said he's a fit for Sean Payton, and I don't know where that fit is for Shadour. Which I've had a couple people say to me, if he goes in the first round, it's because of an owner. And I don't know where that would land him. What I would see John Mara doing, if we're talking about the Giants specifically, is, look, we took Saquon Barkley 2nd overall in 2018. No one would say that was a mistake, but the other guy in consideration was Josh Allen. And so I want to make sure we're sure. So we're going to do all the work. And people have made a big deal out of I don't know, Adam or whatever reported that Shadour is the Giants are circling back and going and seeing Shadour, right? Well, they're also going and working out Jalen Milroe today, and they're working out Tyler Shuck at Louisville tomorrow. So they're doing all of them. If that news had got out that they're doing 3 quarterbacks in the last week, well, then the context of that's different than just.
Well, Schefter's also trying to sell the draft.
No, of course, no. But I like, and that's not like I've been in that position too. I'm not blaming Adam here because sometimes you find out about one of them, but you don't know about the other two.
But it behooves
him
to make it more dramatic.
Anyway, but I think the Giants are doing all of their homework. The one thing that makes me think the Steelers, it could be the Steelers, is because I think Shadour does have a nice rapport with Mike Tomlin, and Mike Tomlin overruled a bunch of other people in that building on Russell Wilson multiple times during the season last year, where there were people who wanted to stick with Fields, there were people who wanted to go back to Fields, and Tomlin was steady and stayed with Russell Wilson. So we've seen where Tomlin's own instinct has overruled some people in that building at that position specifically. Outside of that, too, I don't think the Saints will take him. I don't know where the landing spot is. And can you imagine if 1 week from this morning he's still there?
I can see it happening.
Yeah. Can you imagine what that's going to be like on television?
Oh, it's going to be Armageddon.
But apparently ESPN doesn't like that, which is interesting. That
why wouldn't they?
Well, Todd McShay has said that he was in meetings, and he doesn't work for ESPN anymore.
Right.
He said he was in meetings with ESPN in the NFL where the kid Will Levis, specifically Will Levis, he brought up, like where they were like, "This is bad. Like we can't have camera shots of guys."
No, I'm not talking about showing him like
no. But I'm getting to something else kind of because you brought it up. So his point was the league invited Jalen Milroe to go to the draft, and so his point was, look, do I think Jalen Milroe is a first-round pick or anything like that? He's like, absolutely not. But
I mean, I had somebody yesterday tell me they think he's Taysom Hill.
Okay, Taysom Hill. Okay, well, I wouldn't take him in the first round. No, but it's just his point was it's interesting that they invited him because he knows the league doesn't want to invite guys that don't get taken. Blah 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 blah.
Sure,
but if Shadour Sanders doesn't get taken in the first round, it's going to become a whole thing about how like the league doesn't like outspoken minority guys and everything else.
And I don't think, and that's not it. He's just not.
Like that's what they're going to say.
He's not physically. He is not a first-round quarterback. And by the way, like Cam Ward, I think most people I've talked to said like last year's class he would have been 4th or 5th.
Right.
Yes,
you know, and he's talented, but like there's a long way for him to go, and you're projecting some with him. And this is a guy who spent 5 years in college, so it's not like Drake May, where Drake was only in college for 3 years. You know, you have 5 years of evidence on the guy. So.
Who was the 4th quarterback taken last year?
Penix.
Because we had a guy on, the guy who does the Beast, and he said he would have been taken above Penix, Nix, obviously.
McCarthy?
Yeah, he said 4th or 5th, so maybe McCarthy was the guy, because he specifically said he would have been taken in front of Penix and Nix. But maybe...
Yeah, and there were differing opinions on those three, how you look at McCarthy and Penix and Nix. But I do think, I have heard that camp, like Shadour's camp, has gotten a little nervous and have made calls around, and I do think their approach may have adjusted a little bit over the last week or so, because I think the realization is there that if he gets past 3, the fall, there's a good chance he's getting out of the top 20, if not out of the first round.
Can you stay for one more break?
Sure.
Okay, because I want to talk to you about this kid at Tennessee. I want to talk a little bit about college football.
Iamaleava.
Does anyone have a problem with that if we keep Bert for another break?
No, we can move what we're going to do at 8 to 8:45. That's not a problem.
Do you care?
No, we didn't even do the Bert Blast.
The crazy thing is...
Jesus Christ, and that's sponsored.
Bert Blast!
By Good Taste.
Oh, we got a sponsor?
No, I don't know.
If you like that clip, and how could you not? Check out more videos from Toucher and Hardy here. Point slightly up and to the left. For more Patriots analysis and opinion, hit this playlist. Point slightly down and to the left. And for the latest from the Sports Hub, download at 985thesportshub.com.